Good morning, sixth grade. We're on to lesson 2 of our solids, liquids, and gases chapter. So lesson 2 is going to be changes of state. So the first lesson we looked at the different states of matter. Now we're going to look at how those different states can change. Okay? So we have our key questions again, 3 of them this time. What happens to the particles of a solid as it melts? What happens to the particles of a liquid as it vaporizes? And what happens to the particles of a solid as it sublimes? So first we have the definition of melting. Melting is the change in state from a solid to a liquid. And then the melting point is the point or specific temperature at which pure crystalline solids melt. Okay, so if you think about like an ice cube, as we see down here, if you take an ice cube out of the freezer, it's solid, right? It's solid ice. And then because of the temperature difference from the freezer to outside of the freezer, it's going to melt. So changing from a solid to a liquid. So at a solid's melting point, its particles vibrate so fast that they break free from their fixed positions. So remember, the particles in a solid are very close, tight together. So then they're breaking free from those positions and they're spreading out a little bit. Because in a liquid, the particles can move freely. So the energy needed to melt the ice cube comes from the air in the room because of the difference in temperature from the freezer, which is really, really cold, to outside of the freezer, which is not cold. Okay, next let's look at freezing. So freezing is the change of state from a liquid to a solid, so the reverse of that ice cube. When you put water in the ice cube tray and then you put that in the freezer, it's going to go from water to an ice cube, so the reverse of melting. And at a liquid's freezing point, its particles are moving so slowly that they begin to take on fixed positions. So remember, in a liquid, the particles can move freely, but at that freezing point, they're moving so slowly that they begin to stay in one spot. Okay, so what about the difference in melting and freezing? Think about that for a second. In melting, the particles break free from their fixed positions and move freely. And in freezing, the particles take on fixed positions. So they go from moving freely to having those fixed positions. All right. Okay. Next we have vaporization. So the change in state from a liquid to a gas. So this occurs, vaporization occurs when the particles in a liquid gain enough energy to move independently. Okay, so think about when you're boiling water. It starts as the liquid, and then it's going to eventually evaporate and become a vapor. So there's 2 main types of vaporization, evaporation and boiling. So evaporation is vaporization that takes place only on the surface of a liquid. So that's going to be only off the top, it's going to start evaporating. Boiling, vaporization that takes place both below and at the surface of a liquid. So again, if you're boiling water, all of the water is boiling, not just the surface of it. And then the boiling point is the temperature at which a liquid boils. Okay? So compare and contrast evaporation and boiling. Both evaporation and boiling, a liquid changes into a gas. Evaporation takes place, remember, only on the surface, and boiling occurs both on the surface and below the surface. So let's look at condensation now, condensation and sublimation. So condensation is the change in state from a gas to a liquid. So the reverse of vaporization, a lot of opposites today in our lesson. So condensation occurs when particles in a gas lose enough thermal energy to form a liquid. Okay, the clouds in the sky typically form when water vapor condenses into tiny liquid droplets. So right before it rains, you have that water vapor that then moves into liquid for your rain. Okay, and then sublimation occurs when the surface particles of a solid gain enough energy that they form a gas. Let me move my bubble so we can read this key point. So during sublimation, particles of a solid do not pass through the liquid state as they form a gas. So it goes straight from solid to gas. So let's look at this picture here. So this is the changing states of water. This is from your book. I know you don't have it, so I'm sorry, but this is why we're going through it. Okay, so over here you have vaporization. And then you have the sun, which has that high thermal energy, which is why the vaporization occurs, because of how high the energy is. And then as we move down, we see condensation. So if you think about like the dew, or when you have a water bottle that you put ice in and then it's sitting, the outside gets all wet, so that's condensation. Then we keep going, we have a melting point. So you see the snowman here that's melting because it's too hot. And then at the very bottom, you have freezing, so it has the lowest thermal energy. Okay? So let's look at our vocabulary from this lesson. So melting was the change in state from a solid to a liquid. Melting point is the point or specific temperature at which pure crystalline solids melt. Freezing is the change of state from a liquid to a solid. Vaporization is the change in states from a liquid to a gas. Evaporation, vaporization that takes place only on the surface of a liquid. Boiling is vaporization that takes place both below and at the surface of a liquid. Boiling point is temperature at which a liquid boils. Condensation is change in state from a gas to a liquid, the reverse of vaporization. Sublimation occurs when the surface particles of a solid gain enough energy that they form a gas. Okay, so that's the end of the lesson for today. As always, if you have questions, please let me know. Your assignment is going to be on IXL, so I will post that on Edmodo with this lesson, the link, and then which IXL skill it's going to be specifically, but I will also suggest that skill to you on IXL. So you're going to be looking at particle motion and then changes of state. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a great day.